And welcome back to Square Off. Right-wing Republican election deniers claim the Republican running the Maricopa County Board cut a dirty deal that keeps their guy out of the loop on elections. There's a lot more at stake here than just this fight. It could tell us whether the new county board remains unified in defending elections as we head into 2026. The Arizona Republic's Sasha Hupka covers our elections. She's written about this flare-up. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thanks for having me.
Take us to the beginning, which I believe is around the fall, maybe last October. What did the county board do at that time that has these Republicans so upset?
So last October, the board, and when we say the board, we're talking about the previous board, right? Because it's got 3 new members. So 2 of them were there, but the rest weren't. The board and Stephen Richer sat down and they renegotiated an agreement that they've had for many, many years. It's called the Shared Services Agreement. And the way that you want to think about it is that it divides up a bunch of election duties that state law just doesn't really place into one category or the other. So state law, right? It's got the recorder over early voting and voter registration, and it's got the board of supervisors over election day voting and tabulation, the actual counting of the ballots. There are a bunch of things that don't fit into that. Where do you put campaign finance? Where do you put IT? You know, where do you put all of these other things? And so that's essentially what happens.
So the net of that agreement was the board took over responsibilities from the recorder. And by the way, the county recorder does not run elections in Maricopa County. I know a lot of journalists from outside the state say that it is the county board. But the board took over some responsibilities, correct?
They did. So they took over 2 really key ones, which was they took over IT. The county has its own kind of centralized IT staff. And so they took the IT team that had previously been under the recorder that was serving both the elections department and the recorder's office. And they said, you know, for cost effectiveness, for consolidation purposes, let's just put that under the board. And then they also took over ballot processing, and that kind of sounds like a very broad term. What we mean by that is the actual point at which the ballot has been signature verified, so they've already checked, right? And then it goes to a bipartisan team that has to separate the ballot from the envelope. At that point, it becomes the secret ballot. And so they took over that specific piece of the process.
So kind of insider stuff. But here's where it gets interesting. The timing of this was interesting. October before November, when Justin Heap, an election denialish Republican, won election as recorder. Was this agreement aimed at Justin Heap and sort of, say, child-proofing the recorder's office?
Well, the board won't tell you that, but Justin Heap certainly thinks so. I mean, he's made the point that this was a lame duck board, which I should, you know, kind of clarify here. This was technically before the election, so I'm not sure it's entirely accurate to say it was lame duck. But he made the point to say this is a lame duck board and a lame duck recorder who came together and did this on the eve of the election. He said that he thinks that move is short-sighted. That is exactly the way he described it.
And here it is 4 months later, and you have Justin Heap and his allies, people like State Senator Jake Hoffman, election denier, who I believe was Justin Heap's campaign manager, and others, you know, in that group who seem to have just discovered this now, or is there another timing involved here?
Well, so I think the thing that's important to note here is that Heap has repeatedly said he wants to renegotiate this shared services agreement. And so what we know has been happening since this new board came in several months ago now is that they've been having these behind the scenes discussions as to, you know, who's willing to renegotiate it, who's not willing to renegotiate, what are they willing to, you know, kind of budge on or not budge on. And it's a little unclear in all of that exactly what Heap wants. He hasn't made that entirely known. I actually asked his office about that, and they wouldn't really comment on it to me. But what is clear is from the budget request that he presented to the County Board of Supervisors last week, he definitely wants IT back. He wants the IT staff back under him.
And he wants money for that as well.
Yes, he does.
And so this group, Hoffman, Others like him, other of his allies, are targeting Thomas Galvin, the county board chair. And this is where it gets political, and this is where we bring it back to voters and why this matters. Why Galvin? Why is Galvin under fire?
So Galvin is the one Republican who stood up to Trump, right? And who was kind of in that Bill Gates, Jack Sellers, Clint Hickman crowd. He's the one Republican who remains on that board. They tried to primary him. Michelle Ugenti-Rita ran for his seat, but she wasn't successful. And so he won, and because his district is heavily red, he then won his general election easily. And so he is kind of the last holdout of that. And I think that, you know, that's why him. He also is serving as chairman of the board at this point, but that's really more a title than anything else. He doesn't really have much more power on the board than any other supervisor. And so I think it's more about who he is as a Republican, right? And maybe not being the super Trump-aligned MAGA Republican that Heap and other members of the Freedom Caucus historically have been.
And so there will be a vote on the recorder's budget. It seems like that vote will be significant beyond just how much money the recorder gets. The politics of it are significant.
Yes, and that vote won't be for a really long time. This budget process takes time. These were just the initial budget hearings that happened last week, so we're not actually going to see this budget until, you know, I think they'll take their first tentative vote on it in May, and then a final one sometime June, July. But
gotta end it there. Sorry.
okay.
I love ending on a but. Okay. To be continued. We're going to be watching that budget vote. Thank you so much, Sasha. And that's our show for this week. Thanks very much to all of our guests. Thank you so much for joining us.